The series starts in a small city with Mayor Bonnie, who is the pawn of the city bell at sunset, and the residents of the city hear the bell, and each one of them runs to his house, and the shops and streets are completely closed, and the deputy mayor returns, and Lee Bacon, his name is Cannell, clinic where his father is, and Lee's name is Mr. Lon. Bacon has Alzheimer's, and he keeps hanging a board with statistics on the number of accidents that happened every day. And then he touches a stone with a strange symbol on it, and it remains hanging on the door of his house. And it appears that every house in the city has the same stone. And in one of the houses in the city, Lauren and Lee are living with her daughter Megan and her nuts. Frank and Lee are still not home, and it takes time. And Lauren hears the sound of the city bell, and she keeps locking the doors and windows. And she remains very worried about her nuts. And Lee, she falls asleep, and suddenly hears the voice of an old woman calling out to her from the window, and telling her that she is her grandmother. She checks Megan Allstair and shows the old six, and tells her that she is not her grandmother. But the old six begs. She opens up to her and tells her that she is alone, and herself is sitting with no limit. And Lauren interferes with the fashion and shows Megan talking to the old six and telling her what to open the window, but it's too late. And Megan opens the window, and suddenly the old six turns into a scary monster with a crowd on them and on the highway. The elder Julia and their little son Ethan, and they stayed comfortable together for a trip. But Michio and Beck feel that they are lost and prefer a leg all night. And on the second day, Frank returns home, and Bella is in a large group of residents and men. The police are around his house, and the first thing that the mayor of Bishofa catches him, and Bixla shows what happened to his wife and daughter. And he says that he abandoned his parents and left them at home alone. And he says that the man's task is to protect his family. And he says to Frank that he took his penalty, and Frank, in front of, in the spirit of the mayor, of a famous house in the city, the Colony House. And they showed the owner of the house, whose name is Donna. And by telling him that his presence is not welcome, the mayor tells her that she is just talking to his son, Shuya. The mayor enters. The first thing that the mayor shows by hugging him, and gently so that he talks with Alice alone, and it appears that the relationship between the mayor and his son is not clear. And he keeps trying to open any topic and tell him about the incident of Laurent and Megan, but it appears that Alice is not interested, is talking with his father. Matthew enters a well-known road, and there is a network in it, and they enter the strange city, and Benzel Mashio from the Arabic, and he asks the Tipsa to close the doors on her, and Bensal Mashio and the inhabitants of the city. Matthew remains surprised and kindly asks all the people, to some extent Peggy, the mayor, and together Kenny and Bish show his mobile Arabic. And they know that he supported him with him, and then they describe the highway to him. Thanks to them, Macy, and he moves in his Arabic, as he discovers that he is Belf and Dwyer, and he does not know to get out of the city and Bish on the highway, but she spits at him with a strange look, and with a smile, with a walk, and with Macy's preference, and got lost in the road, and suddenly an Arab bishop came in front of him, and with the formation of cattle in zigzag lines, and Biff had Macy's hooked lines, and control his Arabic so that he avoids it, and he works an accident, and Biff, and he is wounded in his leg, and a woman is fainting on her, and Julia is a Quissa, and in the second Arabic, driver comes down, and Lee Bacon is named Toby, and he stays. He also discovered that Biff is in Dwyer, Bacon is slightly injured, and Benzel is from the Arabic, and he tries to drive to the city, and the mayor, who Bacon is standing on the road, and Bella is Toby's friend. Wally was with him in the same Arabic, and Bacon's name is Good, and he knows he's drunk. Bobby decides to arrest him, and then he turns on Matthew's Arabic, while Bacon Toby is in the clinic, bored. The nurse Sarah Wally tells him that the accident that happened was not his fault, and suddenly the screwdriver crashed into his neck and killed. And the mayor calls the basement, and the mayor says that the sewing will take her an hour. But the mayor tells Matthew and the rest that they return to the city before the world darken. But Matthew refuses to lose his with the stone. He says that by trying to secure the Arab, and thanks to the mayor and Macy with the assistant Christie, the seamstress got rid of Ethan's wound, and the rest returned to the city. And an hour later, Christie got rid, and they returned quickly before the world is completely dark, and they leave the nearest house for them. And the house will be a colony house, and the mayor locks the doors and windows, and preferably buses on the mobile Arab. In the night, suddenly a group of people around her, and everyone in the house sounds, but Ethan enters a state of speed, and his whole body trembles and makes a sound. And suddenly, a group of people in front of the house, screaming and calling for help. And a Christian opens the door, but the mayor prevents him by saying that they don't really know what their character is and what Macy's is up to, but discover that they are Alice, Julia, Beth, Kenny, and Peggy, and a second group approaches them big. So when Julia asks them for help, but Kenny is careful and hits bullets on one of them. But what happens is needed. They are very, very afraid and prefer to bang on the door. So Donna opens it for them and they enter the house. The mayor cooks them and puts each one of them in clothes to make sure that they are real. And in the spirit of Fatima at home, Chrissy hears the sound of whispers and scribbles on the walls of the house and everywhere, and she is very scared. But the mayor is with her hands, and he tells her what she imagined herself with imaginary needs, and in a second place at home. Donnie sits with a smile and tells her about the monsters that because of her they lock the doors and windows, and tells her about the day she came to this heath with her sister. And she says, brained beings. She says that they beat them with bullets. She killed Toby. And it shows that she had remorse, as if she was working hard to rape her. And by coming home and taking a shower, and then Peggy, her brother, and Lee Bacon, his name is Nathan, and Besall, about dinner, Dara gave him a daughter and told him that she was what born. There was then a second solution, and in the clinic, one of the nurses formed a base with Mr. Liu and the Beacon, Kenny's father, deputy mayor, and looking for the upper floor, and meeting Toby, who was dead on the bed with a screwdriver in his neck, and with a flop that the door was open and a group of strange beings were smiling. So the nurse and Mr. Liu, they are killed in a terrible way. And between him, Kenny, and he's a bigot, and the mayor tries to calm him down, and at Sarah's house, she confesses to her brother that she knocked on the door. Clinic is open because of the voices that whisper to her, and she never had a second solution. And in the colony house, Julia sits with Ethan and tells him his horseshoe, but Ethan stays Sirhan, who is peeping out of the window. And Bacon Chef, a little boy, Peshawar, is to him from afar, and he remains the only one to see him. Beth, Jade, who was drunk, and they rented a house where they were sitting alone, and their cheeks were cut. House was empty, and it would be the same house where Lauren and Megan died. And you know what happened to them? And by raising it, she was a strange box in the house, and asking the story on it, he tells her that the box in which Frank Senior was punished is friendly because he survived on his own and was the cause of their death. And in the house of Colin, Ethan leaves the house and Bischoff a person named Victor, and Lee Bacon is one of the oldest residents in the city, and a stranger smiles at him, and Peshawar turns to him from the mainland of the house, and he turns to him. Victor rages, and before what he responds by interrupting Julia's mother, who shows her brother talking to a strange Victor. And he asks him to enter the house. And before what beam she says, Victor hands him over to his mysterious friend. And in the city, he walks well and tries to turn around on any exit. And Bischoff an underground cellar and thinks that it is possible a secret exit remains from the city, from which beckon a certain limit comes out. But suddenly, Bischoff is presented with mutilated bodies, and all the people who are from the city, between the House of Colony or the city. So choose the Massey family and the city with Day Julia Wally by choosing prefer in the Colony house, and then Peggy Jade and beefed up sweats on them. But Ken Pure is Toby's corpse and acts that everything that happens is real. And B. Grow lives with Kenny and his mother in their house, and with the spirit of Matthew's family, a new house. And thanks to Julia in the Colony house. And before sunset, the people of the city gather in front of Frank's house. And Lee was punished by locking him in the box because of his abandonment of his family. And the mayor is hesitant in his decision. But Frank, Bacon, and Frank goes into the box, and everyone goes home, and suddenly Frank is walking towards the box, and he's close to him, and he's still very scared. But in the future, Julie wakes up from sleep in a Colony house. Victor meets her, watches, and then purifies his drawings. Julie remains afraid of him. A familiar person deals with him, and then by showing a girl who lives in the same house and by wearing a t-shirt. and by showing a girl who lives in the same house, and by showing a girl who, by selling it, Wally was in Julie's purse. So Julie was very upset, but she tries to show the opposite, and with a smile, lets her take it. And in the city, in the spirit of the mayor of the box, that Frank was locked up and the pellet was broken, and the Bishop of Frank was killed horribly in the shell of his body to bury it. And between cleaning the place and rebuilding the box from the second, and then taking his body to bury it, and the bishop of the story, their house is the reason for Frank's death, and that the punishment of the box was his idea. The story says that he needs to hear his words, and that he who came up with the idea of the stones, which is a spell to endure the houses of evil beings, and that he who made the idea of the bell and designed a system that protects the city. And it was another time when the residents of the city were all dead, and in the restaurant of the city, the nurse Sarah remained working there alongside her job, and Miss Lily was seen eating on her nuts. Matt and Sarah called Very Sarah, and knowing that she was the reason, and in Macio's family house they stayed to try to adapt to their new situation. And Ethan woke up from sleep and asked to eat a sweet need. They took Macio and moved the restaurant to eat in it, and Macio got out of his place, and Ethan was on his own, and Victor during the drawing. And then Layson tells about the tree that moves, telling him that he moves 4 inches every day. And then Victor offers to draw a small child and ask if the child who saw him is right, the House of Colony. And it turns out that he is the same child, and Bishop Matthew Ace, and he is talking with Victor. His father eggs and says he is away from his son and returns home, and in a good spirit to return to the basement that he shared with Kenny, but he did not see any bodies or a mark on the ceiling. And she tells them that they don't really want to stay together, and that she knows that they want to divorce after the death of her brother Thomas, and that she doesn't want to be part of the family. So she leaves. At home, she is sad, and in the mayor's office, Jade connects with Kenny, who is the city planner, and tells him that all the people who travel on the city road, what she graduated from, Bislam Jade, and what Bekonch is the believer who gets, and Bissall for the reason. But Kenny says that if he tries to know life, he goes crazy. Jade's house is nervous, and he hears strange voices from the radio at the same time. Essen stays sitting in his room alone, and Peggy Victor talks to him from the garage, and asks him to come out to talk to him. And Ethan comes out without his father. His mother feels it, and Victor tells him that they need to go around the child, which Isan saw in the face of Allah Essen about the reason. And he tells him, because the chosen child, and they moved with some forest and arrived at a tree with a strange shape. And Victor lands a Korah painted on it, and the faces of the trees suddenly appear the same in the forest. The little boy, who Izan Shav, was almost there before. But suddenly he disappears, and he hears the sound of a dog from afar, and suddenly Tiggy has a memory of a Shav dog when he was little. And when he tries to think about it at the time, Macy and Tapis discover that Isan is not at home. And they run around everywhere, and they run into the forest, and there they meet a dog, barking loudly, and they know that Isan is in danger, and they prefer to run around to some extent. They meet with Victor, who shoots fire in the air to keep the dogs away from them, and Macio with the person in charge of Victor, and together with them, Victor returned the house and Bidor on his drawings, so that the dog would think about what he saw in his mind, and try to arrange his drawings on the events he tries to think of her from his childhood. And after grilling, he meets Mayor Macio and Tapas, and they talk about what Victor is doing, and then Peggy Kenny, and he asks the mayor to come with him, necessary. So, your house, Tapas and Matthew together, and each one of them apologize for his strangulation with the second. And Matthew sold that, what passed through the company at the time while Victor was still digging in the ground in front of Kalini. Don smiled at what he was doing, and he scared people in his own way. So he tells her that he is preparing for Lee J, and at Sarah's house, her brother knows Nissan, who happened to his sister, and her spirit is hospitalized. And Nak Christy stays by taking care of her and telling them that she prefers to stay up all night with her and continue their time together. And suddenly Sarah asks Christy if she is willing to do a terrible need. But in exchange for Jade fixes the radio, and it remains the only hope for him to communicate with the outside world. And Bacon is the only one who is not able to accept the idea that he is locked up. Sarah visits him at home and plays with him, and the broadcast is a base with them. And with Sarah Isa remaining, Payson singles out and suggests to Tabsa that she takes him with her to the farmhouse. Tabsa tells her that she is Fidea, and it is possible for TG together with them and in a colony house. In the spirit of Fatima and Julia enjoy their time in Fatima, tells about her life before she was locked up in the city and in the cemeteries. The mayor visits the grave of his wife and tells her, with a trembling hand, that what is near and remains, he means that he is dying, but he keeps thinking about an idea that allows it. The foreign people, she leaves the city and returns home safely, and in the church, Neeson decides that he confesses to the clipper that Sarah did in the clinic, and they say that she has an intention to kill Isan, and that the writing that was on her hands is like orders to control Sarah and remain necessary to implement it. Otherwise, everyone will die. Though the house is very and Ethan at the same time. Sarah tells Tebus and Ethan about the state of the city, or the appearance of the beings who forced people, that she is being interrogated from the time of sunset, and tells them that the city is full of hideouts. But she tells them that in a special secret hideout, and a barn with their belongings, and by asking them to come with her so that they could show the hideout, go with some hideout, and by saying that the smiling Sarah enters the hideout and experiment. But suddenly, Sarah locks her go the hideout, and kindly alone with Ethan, and by looking at the scalpel with which, and Biggie Nathan grabs Sarah before she runs and Ethan sees, and in love, Sarah frees herself and accidentally kills her brother with the scalpel that is in her hand. And he spots on the floor, and he bleeds and dies, so he ran away quickly, and the sheer that Biggie sees and hears is exciting. And the rest of the residents of the city in the night got and left for the farm, the time when the sister's pastor arrived at the colony house, and at the farm with a very sad smile on what happened in April, who was defending her son, and writing a question on the floor of the house and saying, "Did we really survive the accident?" And when he tries to tell, he guides the people of the city at the time, when Victor stays to dig a lot of holes in the form of a grave in front of the house and in the church, with a spirit that broadcasts to the story and asking if Sarah can live in the righteousness of the house. He tells her the story, that she's probably going to die, and after walking down the stairs to the ground floor, where Sarah is trapped and tied up in the chair, he knows, and Kenny and the mayor continue to bury Nathan's body, and Sarah uses his work in Mr. Liu, and the mayor is killed. They take the talisman stone with them and walk in the forest at the church. He decides to lock up R in the box because of what he has done. And at Masio's house, he discovers that the electric wires are faulty, because the plastic faces the same. What is the behavior of electricity originally? And suddenly Jade enters Massey's house with a radio and a large set of wires and asks him to help him repair the radio. So they collected needs from Arab Jade to help them repair, but they discover that the Arabic battery does not exist, and after they fix the radio, they choose a high tree to land the radio on and receive a signal. But it turns out that Jade has a phobia of heights, and Peter Massey, and suddenly Bischoff. Jade blood came down from under the tree, so it remains on its branches, and a large number of corpses are hanging on the tree and bleeding blood. And Bischoff the same symbol that he saw on the cap, which is painted on the wall. In the basement of the church, Sarah tells the story about the voices that she hears, and the one that remains, as if by bringing her from a monstrous need that will happen, or by using her, and by saying that they are the voices of people locked up in her costume, and trying to appeal to her, and by rejecting that, Sarah by hearing their words. And it is reported that in 2 Arabs they arrived in a city and that it really happened. And what happened? Pastor Mossadegh and I keep trying to spin an explanation for what happened. And I felt that Sarah was crazy. And suddenly Sarah cried and told him no, as if she was a monster, need to happen. And then by asking, cutting a piece of paper and saying that the voices are needed to deliver a message to him. And in Matthew's house, she is thinking about broadcasting it in an idea that she can get out of the city. And by early, that she is tracking the electrical wires that are coming from the city. And by lowering the dome and digging in it to connect the wires at the time, Matthew is trying to pick up signals from the radio. And Jade is driving to Miss Lou's house and telling her what happened. But Mrs. Lou's role was decided in very old boxes. And by the mayor tries to talk to Kenny, but Kenny Bacon is sad and unable to speak. So the mayor confesses to him that he is sick and that he is dying soon and that he needs to be ready to take his place at any time. And the forest is what Matthew can do. He delivers the signals and returns home. And there is a bellicose broadcasting it in the basement of the house and rotating on the behavior of the electrician. And suddenly he asks if he thought about the war that he made for her from the shoelace by selling it. And he tells her that the day Julie was born was lost. Anna takes advantages, addresses him by proving to him that it is the same bracelet by selling it, and by saying that they should find out they are an attack here, and by saying that the idea that she's doing is to get out of the city by tracing the source of the lines. The electricity kills Matthew with her words and helps in digging in the church. Sarah draws the story that the voices say to him to prove to him that she is not crazy, and Bella has drawn a hole between the graves, and Bacon has a box that was hidden by himself for every long time. And Bacon is sure that No Limit knows about any need, and the young people filmed a girl standing and saw the Shabakand open the curtain, and Bella had a beautiful girl with him, and a lot of flowers, and they said that she loves roses very much, and asked him to enter her face, the house, and the rest of the summary of the second part of the series so that we can complete the story for you.
Thank you for watching Sam Bubbles' creation. Subscribe, like, and react to the video.